You are here to find the most unbiased information on the new Titleist GT2 driver. We are here to give it to you. Mark, let's dive into what we found on the robot.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting actually. This is a pretty big step for Titleist. You know, they've changed quite a few things. I mean, it's their first carbon driver, and we found a few things. A little more speed, definitely a little lower spin, and a little lower launch too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's dive into how the technology, what the technology is and how it kind of refers to the robot. So there's a few key factors. We've got this new crown, like you said. They're calling it a thermoform seamless crown. So it's the first time Titleist have gone away from a titanium body.
Right, and they came up with this material themselves. There's a new material that's really not been used in golf before. And what they were trying to do with it is get it to feel and sound like titanium, but obviously be lighter like the carbon fibers are out there. So it's pretty interesting material. If you kind of drop it on the table, you drop the carbon, it goes clunk, 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 clunk. Steel kind of resonates, and this kind of has a ring to it. So it sounds and feels more like titanium.
Yeah, it's a shame we don't have the little tester.
Yeah,
here,
exactly. That'd be kind of cool to show you.
It really does.
It is different.
Like that.
Yeah, it does.
So what that means is there's more weight to move around elsewhere in the club.
Right.
And we've seen, and we're going to go into much more detail on this, so stay tuned, but we've seen them move around the mass, which they're calling split mass construction. So they've thrown mass lower in the head and more forward, and then they put some back.
Right.
All the models are slightly different to tune in for that player.
Yeah, it's the MOI thing that everyone's talking about a little bit to some extent. Now, Titleist doesn't necessarily believe in that, and I'm probably with Titleist on that to some extent. But because they save some money on the crown, they've got some extra mass. So most of the companies now are trying to put it way back and get your MOI higher, more forgiving. They kind of split that and put like half of it forward and half of it back. So it's a little further CG forward than most drivers, but that helps with ball speed and helps with spin rate. So everything in golf's a little bit of a trade-off, and it works pretty well.
Yep. The next piece of technology is in the face, and the face is twofold. One is visual, really, really clean lines, and I think this is great, especially for GT2 players. They're going to see the face more. The ball's going to be framed. It looks like there's more loft on it.
Right. They basically darkened it a little bit too, and you can really see the standout lines. It's kind of useful. They got these 3 lines here. It's great for us. Like for the foresight, lines all the foresight dots up. But it makes it a little more visual. You can see it, and when you see the face, it's kind of helpful some people because they're scared of not seeing the face, right? So it looks like there's more loft on it than there is.
Yeah, and this is tour driven. So if the tour players are asking for it, it's going to help probably the average golfer if it's a visual thing.
Yeah.
Then we've got the internal of the face. We've got the VFT, which is the variable face thickness and technology.
Right.
It means that the topography on the face, it means ball speed and off-center hits are going to be faster.
Right, and we hear that with all the drivers, right? Everybody's using some sort of variable face technology, whether it's AI with Callaway or TaylorMade with rings and carbon fiber in different levels. But that's obviously in all the drivers now. But what we really don't see, and what's a little different with this one, is just the way the face is set up. It's got a ring around it, but what we've seen, and we'll kind of show this a little later, but right around the center, it's incredibly consistent on how it comes off.
Yeah.
Right. So our quarter-inch test, quarter-inch high and low. I mean, it doesn't change the window at all, which tour players love that. I mean, they're really going to like that stuff.
And Titleist have been tour inspired for a long time, and I guess bringing the 2 in, and I'm sure we'll see a 1 at some point, means that they're broadening their horizons. Yeah. The speed ring, you touched on it there around the face. That means that it basically stiffens that perimeter, so the center hit gets a little more speed out of it too.
Right.
So we're we're not here to just tell you what Titleist are going to tell you. We're here to tell you what the robot does as well. Right. The last piece of the puzzle is aerodynamic, and just explain why our robot test won't verify.
Yeah, that's a little different than most, and obviously aerodynamics it affects the higher speed more. It's not just linear, right? So if you have 1 mile an hour effect at 80 miles an hour, that means you have a 2 mile effect at 150 miles an hour or whatever, but it's not like that. As you get up to the higher speeds, it definitely is more important, but it helps everybody, right? So, I mean, and obviously the smaller the head, the floor is going to probably pick up a little more speed, and the people that play in the floor, have more speed to begin with.
Yeah.
But it all helps. Our robot, we put a certain number of amps in and move it a certain direction. We have a new one coming, which is going to be a little different. We might be able to see a little of that, maybe able to program into it, but we set the robot at the speed. So if it's more aerodynamic, we're actually just taking power out of the robot.
It,
So
yeah.
so we're negating it because we're getting all the same speed. So
Yeah.
we try to get everything apples to apples, but sometimes the apple to apples actually don't show some things. So we'll have to work on that a bit.
Yeah, so the apples to apples are going to tell us exactly what the club does off the face and how it reacts and how all that technology's changed. But just know that when you're out there, you are likely to see a speed gain, a club speed gain, over and above what we can demonstrate. So that's going to double down on what the ball speed does, and then you'll get knock-on effects all the way through.
And I've definitely heard from a number of players that they've seen a little more ball speed, and we didn't see less, maybe a touch more. But the aerodynamics might be doing that.
Yeah, well, it's the perfect segue. Let's jump into the numbers here
Right.
and see what we did see in terms of speed and forgiveness. What we knew about TSR last year and TSR2 in this specific case is that it was super forgiving, and we're still looking at the heel and toe ratings across all the lofts here, and they've actually improved in the heel pretty much across the board.
Yeah, that's the hardest place to fix, right? I mean, toe is obviously you got a little more speed out there and there's a little more room generally, but the heel is a difficult part. So that's a good job they've worked on that part.
Yeah, and they openly said that when they come in to do testing with us. We've improved heel hits and low hits, and I'm like, okay, wow, that's great. Then we look at the speed rating, and we've touched on this just a minute ago. We kind of negate some of the effects of aerodynamics, but what we haven't lost is anything from the center.
Right.
They've improved all this mishit stuff, but they've still got that center speed is almost a touch better than what we've seen in previous
Yeah, if anything,
years.
it was a little higher, but it's marginally higher.
Yeah.
But with the aerodynamics, you might actually see more than that as a person.
Yeah.
But what I thought was really impressive is how consistent it was around the center. I mean, the spin rates didn't change much. What we called, right around the center is our tour test.
Yep.
And, the tour players want to see it come out of the same window. So if they mishit it a quarter inch this way and that, they still want to see it, and they are seeing that. So.
And although not released to the public until today, I guess.
Right.
But this GT2 has been in tour players' bags. It's not for just average golfers. This is consistent enough for tour players. A very good Australian tour player to play it on tour.
Yeah, and Titleist has done really well in drivers the last, since the TSI came out, to be honest. And the TSI, the year it came out, which is several years back now, we just started doing robot testing. But that first year, it was actually the best driver we tested all around. It was good at everything.
So when you're looking at the graphs, we're not just looking at distance, we're looking at kind of the grouping, and you can see, and what Mark's talking about is that circle of all the other colors other than yellow, which is the low center shot in this case, they're super tight together. So the ball's coming out really consistently around that middle. The yellow drops off because a low hit will generally, get more gear effect and grind up in the air a bit.
Yeah, and also, especially, we're testing at 95 miles an hour here, and 95 miles an hour, especially when you get lower lofted clubs. Now, the loft, I think Ackelbach from Golf Week had the best comment I've ever heard, when he had an article, and he said, well, what's the loft of a 10-degree driver? Is it 9, 10, 11, 12? And the answer is all the above, right, because it's roll and bulge. So as you get on the bottom, especially with the lower lofts, it's just not in the air long enough, especially at 95 miles an hour, right? So you'd expect to see the low one actually shorter.
And that's why you see the 10 and 11 degrees.
Yeah, they start getting closer and closer, right?
Yeah, further up the graph.
Yep.
And then spin launch, and this is an interesting one because Titleist have kind of moved a lot of weight around. Our initial expectation was to see that the launch and spin were going to drop down, but that's not what you would want from a GT2 model, really.
No, and we talked to Titleist, and I just barely looked at all the data real quick, and I was noticing, overall it's a couple of RPMs lower, not model specific, but when we dug into the models themselves, we see the 4's lower and the 3's lower, and the 2 actually show a little bit higher, which is actually a good thing.
A good thing,
yeah,
right?
Because there's a lot of people that need spin.
Yes.
And that's probably you'll see on our numbers here. The 11 degree goes the furthest because if you're zero angle attack and zero path, at 95 miles an hour, the 11 is going to go the furthest.
That gives you the most bang for your
buck.
buck
Yeah,
with your
the
aero.
distances on these charts, not so relative. It's more the size of the circles they're around, and getting fit correctly becomes really important.
And this is the point. What we've seen there is Titleist have put a hell of a lot of work in. GT, generational technology, they've driven this technology over the years from what you said, the TS project, the Speed project, to where we are today. And it's more important now than ever with all what you can do, especially with the GT. You can change the weights in the back to dial in that swing weight.
There's
to
a
dial
lot of
in the
adjustability,
CG.
yeah.
The cog's got so much adjustability. The shafts in the Matrix nowadays. So we cannot emphasize enough, go and get fit for this product. Yes, it looks like it's better pretty much in every fashion, in terms of look, sound, feel, performance. We've got
and separation between the models, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, they're actually, like I said, when we originally did TSI, the 3 was almost as forgiving as a 2. And now we're starting to see them kind of differentiate with a little more spin in the 2 than the 3. And so they're definitely better buckets for people to get into. So you can really dial it in.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, this is our call to action. Head to a store, whether it be Worldwide Golf or Cool Clubs, book your fitting today.